Okay, good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully, you can all hear me okay. If you have any issues, if you could just drop that in the chat box down below. And while we're waiting for some more people to join, I'm just going to launch our first question of the evening. I'm going to ask, where are you joining us from? So if you can just, on your screen, you should be able to select where in New Zealand you're from, and I'll give you a second to answer that question. Cool. So I can see some people writing it in the chat. If you can see the questions on the middle of the screen, you can actually click your answer there and then it will show up. But looks like we've got quite a wide range of cities, regions joining us tonight, which is awesome. And while everybody's answering that, I'm going to quickly run through some housekeeping points. First of all, please note that this webinar will be recorded. We've got a lot to cover this evening, but I anticipate that the webinar will run for about an hour, and we'll try and stick to that time frame. But if you do need to leave, no worries at all. Just click off, and we thank you very much for your time. We'll also send an email out tomorrow with any resources or any links that we use or mention tonight, and we'll also share a recording of the webinar, which you're welcome to share with friends, families, colleagues, or skip through again if you need to. So I'm going to end that voting and share those results. So yeah, you can see that there's a wide range of regions joining us tonight, which is awesome. Even some people from outside of New Zealand. Let me flick back to here. I'm going to show you this one here. So I've enabled the question and answer box that's down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen there. So you'll be able to ask a question, or you can also use the chat box if you need any help. And during the webinar, we'll be asking you a couple of questions to help get a gauge of our audience, like the one that you just answered. And I have a second question to ask you already. Let me launch that quickly. So do you own an electric vehicle? It's going to be interesting to see what that split is. We've kind of geared this presentation towards people who are in the consideration phase of purchasing an electric vehicle. So if you do own one, maybe you'll already know all of this information, but it might just be a good refresher as well. And so while we're waiting for those answers, I will introduce myself. My name is Bailey, and I'm joining you tonight from Auckland. I look after all things marketing and communications at ChargeNet, and I'm really excited to have you all with us tonight. It's great to see so many people interested in clean mobility. And thanks to the rising fuel prices and increasing climate change awareness, EVs are a hot topic. Naturally, because it's still a relatively new technology, there are plenty of questions surrounding EVs. But the good news is that they're much easier to understand than you might think once you know the basics. So with that, let's dive in. I'll quickly share those results there. So let's say, is that 44% of people do own an electric vehicle, and the other, quick maths, 49% who answered don't own an electric vehicle yet. So I'm going to flick back to that presentation there and head on to the next slide. So this webinar is brought to you by ChargeNet. ChargeNet is New Zealand's leading public charging network, and we have more than 500 charging stations. Sorry, got confused there. More than 500 charging stations around the country. And our purpose is to make charging as simple and accessible as possible. And since our inception, we've been involved in EV advocacy and education. Now, when I had the idea for this webinar, I reached out to Catherine at the Better NZ Trust. And when it comes to EVs, Catherine is one of the most clued up people I know. She's the chairperson for the Better NZ Trust, a charitable trust aimed at making the lives of ordinary New Zealanders better through sustainable living. And when I reached out to Catherine, she was more than happy to help, and I'm just extremely grateful for her help. A quick look at our agenda for tonight. Catherine will kick off the evening with an introduction to electric vehicles. Gavin will then talk to us about the different models available in New Zealand. I'm then going to have a little Q&A session with Will about his, I'm getting distracted down there, with his real world experience. I'm going to then let you know a couple of ways that you can test drive an electric vehicle, when they're going to speak to Richard Briggs from ECA about the Clean Car program and their total cost of ownership calculator. And then I'm going to come back on and speak to you about charging an electric vehicle. And then we'll round up the evening with a Q&A session. And you're welcome to start sending through those questions now. And we can, if you send them through the Q&A box, it means that we can collate them and make sure that we don't miss any at the end. Just one second. So full disclosure, I'm not an EV driver yet myself, but I do hope to make the switch in the next 12 months. So I'm in the consideration phase, like many of you are, I'm sure. So I understand that there's a lot that goes into before considering and purchasing an EV. And like you, I'm keen to hear from people who have already made the switch to electric mobility. And I'd like to introduce you to a few of them. So I'll ask our presenters to come on and giving us a little bit of a wave and say hello.
G'day.
Hello. So these are our presenters for the evening. Catherine, I'll start with you if you want to give a quick introduction, say where you're from, and yeah.
Hi, well, good evening, Bailey and everybody else. My name's Catherine. As Bailey said, I'm the chairperson of the Better New Zealand Trust, and I'm based in Auckland.
Sorry, Will, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so my name is Will, obviously. I'm based in Christchurch, and I am some might say, very passionate EV owner driver, and I like talking to people about EVs and helping them with their journey.
Perfect. And did you say that whereabouts in New Zealand are you?
Christchurch.
Christchurch. Did you say that at the beginning? Apologies. And yourself, Gavin?
G'day, my name's Gavin. I am from Ecotricity, a renewable electricity provider, and I've been an electric car nut for ages, and I'm in Auckland.
Awesome, thank you. We also have Richard Briggs joining us. I think he might be having some issues with his camera. Richard, do you want to turn your can you turn your voice on? There we go.
Microphone my voice on. I'm still working on my camera problem at the moment. I apologise for that. So good evening, everybody. Richard Briggs. I'm the manager of the transport program at the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority. And hopefully at some point in the next hour, you'll be able to see me. I'm working on it.
Yeah, you're not sitting there in the dark, Richard.
Oh, hope not, no.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And a really big thank you to our speakers for giving up their time to chat with us tonight. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to head back to the presentation now. Here we go. And Catherine's going to kick us off with an introduction to electric vehicles. But before we do that, I have another question to ask everyone. Pretty important question. So we're keen to find out how familiar you are. Oh, where did that go? Just one second. How familiar are you with electric vehicles? Give that a quick second, and then I'll close the survey, Catherine, and then you can take over.
Fine, thank you. Okay, good evening, everybody. As Bailey's already said, I think we can safely say that EVs have never been more popular. In New Zealand, this has been magnified with the introduction of the Clean Car discount. Worldwide sales are rising steeply as many legacy car manufacturers introduce EVs or hybrids into their fleets, offering a greater choice of vehicles. As you can see on the right-hand side, 60% of the 2,500 respondents to a driven survey said they were considering an EV as their next car. This is great news indeed. And as for a few figures to kick off with, the EV fleet is, as that number says, 39,598. It's probably over 40,000 now, out of a total registered 4 million light vehicles. So we have actually got to 1% of the fleet. So we're trending in the right direction. But let me first just explain the difference of EVs which are available. Battery electric vehicles, or BEVs as we tend to call them, have 1 or 2 electric motors situated on the front and or the rear axles, and the large battery is actually on the floor of the vehicle, and that's composed of many cells or pouches configured into a very rigid framework. People often say it's a skateboard look. A PHEV is a plug-in hybrid. So this is an ICE vehicle which has an additional small battery which holds electricity generated by the action of driving downhill and of braking. Typically, PHEVs might do 40 kilometers or so on battery alone before requiring the petrol engine to kick in. However, like a BEV, the battery can be charged by plugging into an electric socket at home. The downside is that there is a petrol engine to service. And let's not forget the original hybrid. You'll all know the Toyota Prius, an ICE vehicle with a very small additional battery that holds electricity created by driving downhill and from braking. But it makes the engine a very fuel efficient indeed. And as a result, many of you will have taken a taxi ride in a hybrid. But these batteries cannot be topped up by plugging in, and therefore basically do not count as an EV. So whilst thinking about driving an EV, there is actually a different mindset. First,
It looks like Catherine might be having a... Okay, Catherine has dropped out for a minute. So I will take over while Catherine rejoins us. Hopefully, can you all hear me now? I'll just wait for somebody to add that in the chat. Perfect. Okay. So as Catherine was saying, driving an EV takes a different mindset. So think long term. EVs can be more expensive than the petrol or diesel equivalents, but over time their running costs are a lot lower. You do need to plan a little bit. You do need to plan more for long distances and for charging. So take those into consideration. But on the flip side, taking the time to charge often means that you'll get to explore maybe a town that you had previously not experienced. Check before towing. Many manufacturers state that their EVs should not be used for towing, but that's not always accurate. There are many people around New Zealand who are using their EVs for towing. Somebody's just said freeze. I hope that you can all hear me. Different types have different benefits, and so if you refer back to the hybrids, the PHEVs, and the battery electrics, you do need to assess whether or not, which option will be right for you. I think Catherine might be back with us, so I'll give Catherine a second to join. There we go.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I suddenly realized I was talking to a blank hand.
No worries at all. I jumped in and I have covered.
Well done. Well done.
I've covered the EV takes a different mindset. So if you could go reasons to buy an EV, that would be awesome.
Well, first of all, they're very much fun to drive. They're beautifully quiet. They have great acceleration when required, and the stability of the battery on the floor gives very safe and good cornering. They have a zero carbon footprint, something we have to consider as climate anomalies become too frequent to dismiss. There are emissions during the manufacturing process of an EV indeed, but it is recognised that before the car reaches its second birthday, the savings in emissions have cancelled those out. They're cheap to run, using New Zealand generated electricity, Q Ecotricity, and can be plugged in at home on a 3-pin plug. EVs are new technology, and many people just love the idea of the innovation that is presented to them. Using homegrown electricity removes the dependence we have on foreign imported oil. We know now how sanctions and wars dictate the price at the pump. The actions of Russia and the Middle East countries should not be causing us down here grief. The electric motor is a very simple machine, no more than 20 moving parts, and requires no maintenance, so servicing costs are tiny. The only elements in an EV that require much attention are the tyres, the windscreen washers, and the brake fluid. And the brake fluid is routinely changed every 4 to 5 years. The other great thing which helps reduce the spread of asthma and bronchial diseases is that these cars are great for the environment, as there are no particulate and noxious gas emissions. But is an EV right for me? Obviously, as you can see on the screen, 90% of our car trips are shorter than 90 kilometers, and the average daily travel is 30. So looking at those, you could say that most people could surely integrate an EV into their lives and hope that the switch is not too hard. However, as we've seen earlier, the purchasing cost can sometimes be a little steep. But this is where you may need a spreadsheet calculator to do the maths to quantify the spend you do on petrol and maintenance of your current ICE car. Or you could refer much more easily to the GenLess total cost of ownership calculator. And I'm sure Richard will tell you more about that later. But perhaps the one thing that gets very many people's goats who drive electric vehicles is that there are so many common misconceptions which are frequently brought up on Facebook. First of all, the batteries don't last. Well, most manufacturers warrant their batteries between 8 and 10 years. For instance, the Kona is warranted for 10 years and it should not drop below 70% capacity of its original range within that 10 years. But if after 10 years that range is no good for you, then you would trade up, sell it to somebody who's happy with that range, and you move to a bigger range car. Further use of static storage gives an EV battery a potential way in excess of its drivable life. But they're too expensive. Well, like ICE cars, you can spend anywhere between 10K and 200K on an EV, and your bank account will determine which one you can choose. But you have to consider the total cost of ownership. Cue Richard later on. The grid won't cope, but most EVs can be programmed to start and finish charging at home to suit your lifestyle. Installation of smart meters will also help smooth out electricity usage for the benefit of the supplier, the grid, and the individual, with many retailers now offering cheaper tariffs overnight to incentivize off-peak charging. It has been estimated that were all light passenger vehicles to miraculously become EVs overnight, we would need an increase of 15% in our current power usage. The power bill will soar. Oh, this is an absolute corker, isn't it? Yes, it might go up slightly, but most EV owners find that the lack of petrol bills more than compensates for that. At 15 cents a kilowatt hour overnight, you can probably drive 100 kilometers for $3. Yes, but charging takes so long. Well, home charging certainly does take long because it's very slow, but it's happening whilst either you're watching TV or asleep, so you probably don't really care. When away from home, you would be using the ChargeNet fast chargers, and Bailey will be telling you more about that later on. But EVs are too slow. They're like golf carts. No, they're not. An EV has an electric motor which gives absolute instant power, and the acceleration that can be obtained by flooring it is usually enough to elicit gasps from any passengers. While this is not recommended for takeoff from traffic lights, such acceleration can make an overtaking maneuver very quick indeed, and therefore safe. Yes, but there must be a fire risk. Look at the comparison, 5 fires per billion to 55 per billion, according to a USA records from 2015. And this one, they can't go through a car wash. Now, you know, most cars can drive in the wet and a storm and snow or even a deep puddle. The beauty about an EV is that the batteries and motor are fully sealed, have no air intakes or exhaust to suck in water. So actually, you're better off in an EV if you're trying to drive through a flood. Ah, yes, but in that case, they still can't charge in a power cut. Well, no, they can't, but then a petrol pump doesn't pump either. So you could also be interested to hear that the Hyundai Ioniq 5 is the latest EV, which actually now offers a plug on the car, which allows you to plug in a kettle or any other appliance in an emergency situation. Lithium is a rare resource that's been disproved again. As you can see, it's something which can be created by pumping brine to the surface, and solar evaporation works on that. So in the end, how far can an EV go? Well, how long's a piece of string? It depends what you want for your lifestyle and how much money you can afford. Obviously, the greater battery size, the further range, but sometimes range isn't absolutely everything. Thank you very much indeed. Back to you, Bailey.
Catherine, I think that you covered some really important points there. I will welcome Gavin back on now, who's going to run through the different models of EVs which are available in New Zealand. So you're up now, Gavin.
Oh, hi. Hello, everyone. My name's Gavin, and I've been an alcoholic. Oh, sorry, no, wrong seminar. I'm going to be just briefly talking about who I am and the electric cars that are available today. First of all, about me, my name's Gavin. I have been an electric car nut for about 20 years or so. That culminated back in 2007 when that car you're looking at now, I took that and I converted it to run on batteries. This is, of course, back in 2007. There was nothing really available. I couldn't go and buy a Nissan Leaf at that point. They didn't exist. But I saw a movie called Who Killed the Electric Car? And if you've seen it, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's a brilliant movie. I won't spoil it for you because it's worth watching. But long story short, the California Regional Council there, whatever they call it, they mandated that car makers had to make a certain amount of electric cars. They did. They complied. They made fantastic cars. Everyone loved them. They lobbied to overturn the law. The law was overturned. The cars were recalled and crushed, and that left me, really bitter and wanting electric cars. So I thought, right, I'm going to go and make my own. So I took that thing and converted it to run on batteries. It took about 9 months. It was a great learning experience. That was then. That was at a time where if you wanted an electric car, it was a case of, well, how do I make one? Nowadays, the choice is, which ready-made electric car do I buy? And there is a lot of choice. We've got the luxury today of, obviously, electric cars like the Nissan Leaf or the Hyundai Kona, all of this sort of stuff. But we've also got electric vans available now. There's an electric ute that's now on sale and should be arriving later this year. There are electric big rig trucks. I had the pleasure of driving in one of those a couple of weeks ago. So, and this is just the beginning. It's just going to get better and better and better. As for what vehicle is right for you, that depends on your range requirements and your budget. Obviously, if you have the money, you could buy a Tesla Model 3 long range, and that will give you about 600 kilometers per charge. Absolutely staggering. Or if you're like me and you're on a budget, you could look for something cheaper. I looked on Trade Me this afternoon. There were about 8 or so Nissan Leafs for less than $10,000. They would do around about 60 to 120 kilometers per charge, depending on the state of health of the battery. Of course, the sky's the limit. When it comes to electric cars, you get what you pay for. Now, if money's no problem, if you've got a bit of money in your pocket, there's no shortage of electric vehicles available for you to buy right now. But yeah, if you're like me, you're probably looking for something a bit cheaper. For that, my recommendation would be, if you're looking to get into the electric car market, a Nissan Leaf, a used Nissan Leaf. Like I said, you can pick one of those up for less than 10 grand. Obviously, if you want to go a little bit higher, you'll get slightly better range, better battery capacity. But a used Nissan Leaf will set you back around about 10 to 20 grand for an entry-level version. And from that, you'd never have to worry about buying gas again. The question now is, how do you find a good one? This is a question that a lot of people ask. How do you find one that's got a good battery, or one that's not going to die tomorrow? Well, there's a video I made, which you can watch, that teaches you how to spot a good Nissan Leaf, what issues to look for, what common problems there are, how to determine the health of the battery. And you can find that by going to ecotricity.co.nz and going to, and here comes the plug, the EV Buyer's Guide. Now this is, it's a brilliant, I mean, of course I'm going to say it's brilliant because Ecotricity, I work for them, but the truth is it is a brilliant service where you can find every single electric vehicle manufactured in New Zealand, the price, the range, the charging time, the power, all the sort of stuff is available at ecotricity.co.nz on the EV Buyer's Guide. And in the case of the Nissan Leaf video I was just talking about, if you click on the Nissan Leaf page, you'll find that there. Hang on, I do actually have some notes written down here so I don't lose my train of thought, which has gone off the rails a long time ago. Some quick things I just want to talk about even in the 5 minutes that I have is some arguments I've heard, or fears I've heard about electric cars is the high purchase price. And that is a concern for many people, but used cars are a great solution. Not only that, car makers such as Volkswagen do predict that by 2025, in just 3 years from now, the manufacturing cost for an electric car will meet that of the manufacturing cost for an internal combustion car. And from there on, it'll just get better and better. It's a lot like, if you're as old as I am, you'll remember DVD players from the late 90s. I remember a mate of mine went and got one, and we went over to his place and watched some DVDs, and they were, I think, around about $1,100 at the time. Of course, now you can't even give DVD players away, and the same thing is happening with electric cars. It's already beginning. We're ahead of the forecast in terms of falling prices for electric vehicle production, and it's only going to get better. Oh yes, what else have I got mentioned? Oh yeah, of course, the benefits to electric cars, Catherine already mentioned. Near zero running costs. All you've got to do is replace the brake pads. And there's one other thing that might make me sound like a terrible person, which I am, of course, is the smug feeling you get when driving past gas stations. To be able to drive past a gas station knowing you never need to use any of their services again is a very good feeling. Unless, of course, you do decide that you want to spend $4.50 on a chocolate bar, then you can go in there. But otherwise, it's good knowing you never have to replace belts or pulleys or exhaust pipes or pumps and filters other than the pollen filter on an electric car. Yeah, there's a thing called the EV grin, where you find yourself just smiling while driving. If you have an electric car already, you know what I'm talking about. One other thing I just want to quickly mention is perhaps a little bit of a controversial take, and that's to do with price. It's true that electric car prices are falling. That being said, I don't think that's necessarily going to mean that electric car prices are going to fall for the consumer very soon. That comes down to the fact that the public demand for electric cars is through the roof right now, spurred on by gas prices. That, and there are also shortages globally for minerals and metals and things like that, which means that I think even though electric car production prices are falling, we may not see really cheap cars on the dealer lots yet. And the point I'm getting at is that if you're thinking that I'm just going to leave it a year or two, wait for prices to fall, I'm not sure if it's going to happen within a year or two, just because of demand and global shortages. So my advice to you is if you're considering buying an electric car, go ahead and do it. Make the move. Your pocketbook will thank you, and you'll be laughing all the way to the bank. And that's pretty much it. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk, and I'll be selling CDs out the back of my car in the parking lot. And this is an awkward silence. Bailey, help.
Sorry about that, but that was awesome. Thank you very much. I've also come to the slide that is the different types of models that are coming, I guess, a little bit of a sneak preview of vehicles that have, concept vehicles that have been alluded to. Some of them are not actually concept cars. That Rivian Ute is due, I hope this year. They were testing it at the Southern Hemisphere Proving Grounds at the end of last year, middle of last year. So hopefully it's not too far away for us. And with that, I have another question to ask you. Let me just quickly launch that. Close that one. So got this. 1 second. The question is, do you know anyone that owns an EV? So let me pop that up there. There we go. Took me a second. But hopefully you can answer that for us and let us know. And once that is wrapped up, I'm going to welcome Will back onto the stage, and I will have a chat with Will about his EV journey. That's awesome. So over 75% of you know someone with, and that's increasing, more than 75% of you know someone that has an electric vehicle. And I'm certainly seeing that too. More and more of my friends and family are coming to me to let me know that they've purchased an electric vehicle, which is always really exciting to hear. So I will close that one up and then welcome Will back. Hello.
Hey Bailey, how's it going? Oh my God, don't tell me I have to follow Gavin. He's got jokes.
He's got plenty of jokes. So Will, thank you very much for speaking with us about your EV journey. I thought it would be a fun way to learn more about your experience would be just to dive in and ask you some questions that I have. You've been a passionate EV driver or EV ambassador for some time now. When did you first get into EVs?
Yeah, so it all started back in 2015. I actually was reading an article about SpaceX, and then that kind of started me down the rabbit hole of finding out about Elon Musk and Tesla. And I just kind of got a little bit obsessed with the idea about having a car that could run on electricity, that didn't have carbon emissions, and didn't require heaps of maintenance. At the time, I had a car that was costing me $4,000 in repairs in the time I owned it. So I was feeling very, very enthused by the idea of having something that would just be easy to have. And then that year, I went to a Leading the Charge event that Catherine was running. And that's where I drove my first EV. And I was like, oh my God, I need this. And then 3 years later, I managed to actually get my hands on one.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so I guess you covered, or what convinced you to buy an EV?
Well, I mean, I'm an environmentalist at heart, but I think that for most people, like it's really hard to make a decision like that without it making sense in the money thing. So I'm a bit of a financial nerd. I put all the figures into a spreadsheet, and I basically worked out that if I put in $10,000 more on top of what I already spent for a car, that's the difference to go to an EV. I was going to be saving $2,000 a year. That's a 20% year-over-year return, which is far better than the 5% you're going to get from the bank. So when I sort of saw that, I was just like, oh man, that's a no-brainer, It's just about that sort of price difference. And then, being better for the environment and being a nicer drive is just the icing on the cake. Yeah,
ticking a lot of boxes.
Exactly.
And what type of EV? What type of EV did you first buy? And what are you are you still driving that same car now, or?
Yeah, so the first car I got was a 24 kilowatt Nissan Leaf. And then I had it for a couple of years. I was doing a lot of long distance driving. I was towing with a trailer on it. I was going down to Invercargill with a trailer. And what I found after a couple of years is that in the winter, it was just getting a little bit harder to sort of get between charging stations. I needed to charge 100% some of them. So I actually ended up upgrading it. I traded it in and I got a 2016 30 kilowatt Nissan Leaf. And that's what I'm still running now. And then also last year, we bought a 2013 Leaf for my partner as well. So we've got 2 EVs in the family.
That's awesome. And of those, so both of them are Nissan Leafs. What's the range of both of them?
Yeah, so the 2013 we actually got a real cheap, like just the worst car you could possibly buy. It cost us $7,000. Has a 50% state of health battery, which is below average. That one only does about 80 Ks a charge, so that's still more than enough for me to get from home to the shops. I work from home most of the day, so that's great for that. And then my other one, my 30 kilowatt, that does about 170 Ks per charge if I'm around town, or if I'm towing between cities, it's more like 120 Ks. So still more than ample for getting around the South Island.
Definitely manageable. Where do you do most of your charging?
So yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'd say when I'm adventuring, most of it is at your wonderful charging network. It's all around the country. I love that. But yeah, 90% of it would just be at home. I have a 16 amp caravan socket that I plug into, and I also have a 8 amp normal, household plug charger that you just plug it into the wall. And between those two, that's more than enough to keep both of our cars topped up.
I'm going to ask a question that we didn't discuss, but both of those, you'll charge both of your vehicles at night at the same time, right?
Yeah.
No issues.
After 9 p.m, I have an alarm every night to tell me when the cheap power is.
Yeah, nice. But you don't blow up your household electricity by just plugging in 2 vehicles.
No. Well, you can't. I can't plug 2 cars off the same 16 amp socket, but I've got, the 16 amp is on one circuit, and then the 8 amp is on another circuit, so it doesn't have any issues. I don't have a special 3-phase power or anything like that. It's just a normal house. You just have the load on separate circuits. The load for a car is, as you know, no different from a hot water cylinder or a heater.
Yeah, nice, perfect. And so you've spoken about you're based in Christchurch, but you've spoken about your love of road tripping. How did that start? And I think I'm going to pull up that lovely graphic that you supplied with about your trip from Christchurch to Motueka.
Yeah, so going for a road trip was a big part of my childhood. We used to hop in the car and just travel all around the North Island. But as petrol got more expensive, and we stopped doing it as much. So one of the misconceptions out there is that you can't do road trips in a cheaper EV. Like everyone thinks, oh yeah, a Tesla, you need that to go for long road trips, but you can't do it in a Nissan Leaf. Whereas I found if I just sort of disconnected the idea about I have to arrive I have to arrive at my destination with as little time as possible. If I didn't care about how long it took me, I could actually just go anywhere. And it was very freeing to be able to just drive around the country and not have to worry about petrol costs. It was so cheap. Like I was going from, when I go from Christchurch to Nelson, it, was costing about $90. Now I'm paying $35 in charging, and it takes me 2 hours longer to charge. But I'm saving $60 in petrol, and that's like being paid $30 an hour. Just sit in my car on my phone, browse Facebook, and take some nice, safe driving breaks. So it's really a no-brainer for me.
Definitely.
And then like with this map, I started documenting and sharing my road trips just to sort of try and help people understand how it works, what's involved, show that it's not that scary, show that it's doable. I've made videos sort of showing, recording some of the trips and just sort of trying to give people an idea of what it's like to do long distance driving in one of these cheaper EVs, that it is possible if you sort of just change the way you think about your trip.
Be a little bit more patient as well, right?
Exactly. Enjoy life. We live in a beautiful country, make the most of it.
It's about the journey, not the destination, right? So
exactly.
Cool. I just have one final question for you. If you had one tip to give to someone considering an electric vehicle, what would that be?
Yeah, probably the biggest thing I'd say is that, when you're looking at buying an electric vehicle, try and go to someone that specializes in electric vehicles. It's very common for me to meet people that have an EV and, they either got a car and didn't understand sort of, what the range requirements are, or they end up at a charger and they have no idea how to use it. They don't know they need an account. It's because someone's just taken their money, given them an EV, and then that's out the door. See you later. So you really want to go somewhere where they know EVs. They've got experience with that. They're going to give you the right information you need to be able to start your journey, because it is a bit complicated when you're switching from a petrol vehicle to a EV. When you first got your petrol car, you had to try and figure out what the hell this 96, 91 premium unleaded stuff was. And it's the same with an EV. You've got all these things that it's helpful to keep in mind. And it's not that much more complicated. It's not more complicated than a petrol. It's just a different type of knowledge that you need. And if you just go to anyone that's just trying to take your money, then you're going to maybe end up with a car that doesn't suit your needs, or you might end up in a situation where you don't have the information you need to, get from A to B.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And one of the slides that Gavin showed during his slot was the different secondhand dealers in New Zealand. I think that we're really lucky that those dealers that are selling EVs are really passionate. They know they know their stuff.
It is more than just the secondhand dealers as well. There are a lot of first party manufacturers that are selling brand new EVs, but just try and find someone that's actually knowledgeable about the product they're selling. Don't just go into, if you go down to the local a Nissan store and then want to speak to someone about electric vehicles, if you get to someone that doesn't really know anything about EVs, they just have a leaf on their lot and they're trying to get rid of it, go somewhere else. Make them demonstrate they have the knowledge to be able to answer your questions and actually care about the product so that you can get a good buying experience.
I agree with that. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us. We'll probably have some questions for you at the end as well.
Great. I'll stick around. Cheers, Bailey.
Thank you. Okay, so now we come to test driving an EV. So I might not own my own electric vehicle, but I've had a lot of fun test driving some during my time with ChargeNet, and I always have a lot of fun. So now that you've heard about how fun electric vehicles are, actually, I have one more question, sorry. This is the final question of the night. have you had the opportunity to drive an electric vehicle? And if you answer no, or not yet, I'm going to strongly encourage you to take a look at these next slides that I will share. But it's awesome to see that more than, or about 60% of you have already driven an electric vehicle. That's awesome. Somebody's asked about the used dealer list. I will be sure to, that's on the EVs and Beyond website, and I will send you an email tomorrow that will have probably 20 different links and references in it to point you in the right direction. So that's awesome to see that so many of you have driven an electric vehicle. I'm going to end that voting now and head back to the presentation. So you might be wondering how you can get behind the wheel for an hour, a day, or even a month. Of course, many of the secondhand dealers and dealerships that are selling electric vehicles will be more than happy to give or allow a potential purchaser to have a test drive. But there are other ways that you can experience an electric vehicle for yourself. You could sign up for car share with Zilch or Mevo, hire an EV for a day. There's more and more rental car companies offering electric vehicles these days. You could make it a way of life and use a subscription service, or even take a break in an electric camper van in the South Island with Brits. I have a couple more examples to show you here. So Snap Subscribe is an all-inclusive, hassle-free EV subscription from as low as, sounds like an infomercial, $449 for a month. And they have month-to-month subscriptions, 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. They have Nissan Leafs, they have VW e-Golfs, they have Tesla Model 3, and also the Polestar 2. So a really good way to maybe dip your toe in the water, see if it's right for you before making the commitment. I know of people who are spending $600 a month on petrol these days. So this is a nice park your petrol car in the garage for a month and give an electric vehicle a go. It's a nice low risk commitment. The other option is a car sharing service like Zilch or Mevo. With these services, you sign up and you can hire a vehicle for $16 for an hour, $119 for a day, or they also have monthly subscriptions as well. So quite a few options for you to test drive an electric vehicle. And this is a link that I'll send out tomorrow as well, so you can see the different options. So I'm going to hand over to Richard Briggs from ECA. I'll welcome Richard back from ECA, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority. Hello, Richard.
Good evening, everyone, again. You can now see me. Some no doubt are now regretting that, but I'm only going to be here for a couple of minutes. Hey, look, I'm the transport manager at the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority, and so there's always somebody from the government, isn't there, who's obviously here to help. I'll give it a go. And look, first thing to share with you guys is in the under 3.5 ton categories, New Zealand's got about 3.5 million cars and another 500,000 vans and commercial vans and utes. So that's about 4 million vehicles in total. Interestingly, the fleet is composed of 54% new and 46% used imports in any year. So it's an interesting mix of imports. The statistics took a bit of a hit through the COVID lockdowns, and the new registrations reduced by just over 20%. But the demand is back, and unfortunately the demand is back with a bit of a vengeance, as a lot of people are itching now to spend money, and that's resulted or contributed anyway to a supply constraint for new vehicles, and that's both EVs and combustion engine vehicles. And the constraints, apart from COVID, there's the well-documented chip shortages, and of course New Zealand's got some shipping issues at the moment. With the supply chain issues that are affecting the ability to buy vehicles. But look, even regardless of all of that, the EV growth is absolutely phenomenal. The first chart we've got there shows the fleet size of EVs growing on a monthly basis. and you can see that is just growing, almost exponentially. The other chart there shows the percentage of light registrations that are EVs, and just after the clean car discount came in July last year, there was quite a significant upturn in new registrations, and we've now hit about 8% of monthly registrations being electric vehicles a couple of months now, which is really, really pleasing. The other chart at the bottom is an interesting one because that shows now an increasing percentage of companies registering new vehicles. And the reason we're interested in that is that as company registrations increase, what it does mean is the increased supply of New Zealand new used EVs will be coming on the market in the next 2-3 years, which will be very, very useful. The thing I wanted to talk about is the Clean Car program that has been introduced and managed by the New Zealand Transport Agency. Introduced in July 21 with a rebate component on new electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids and also used vehicles. And as from the 1st of April, the fee component was also introduced. So the Clean Car discount consists of rebates and fees based on emissions of the vehicle. So as I say, both new and used vehicles, the first time they're registered, are certainly eligible. And now the higher the CO2 emissions of the vehicle, the greater the fee is paid in recognition of that. Over time, that bar of zero emissions will drop because the intent of the program is it remains revenue neutral. So more and more zero emission vehicles that are introduced to the fleet, in order to keep it revenue neutral, then that bar will start to lower. So more and more vehicles that do produce emissions will then fall into that fee scheme. Just a point of note, the vehicles need to be 3-star safety rated or better, and also under $80,000 on the road. There's been a lot of talk about the relevance of that $80,000, and I think to maintain the revenue neutrality of the program and also get good bang for the buck of public spend, the 80K is a reasonable ceiling. And I think it's fair to say that if you're looking at a $150,000 to $200,000 vehicle, the $8,000 rebate is probably neither here nor there for someone with that spending pattern, and it will be better utilized to get somebody across the line lower down where it is, as you get below $60,000, $70,000, suddenly that $8,000 becomes more material and probably more effective in influencing change. The fees there, the maximum fee is $5,000 for the highest emitting vehicle, which is, it's significant, but when you're spending quite a bit amount of money on that, we've just got to make sure that it's a sufficient value that is going to get people to think twice about their purchasing decision. In parallel with this, and certainly not something I'm going to talk about today, is the Clean Car Standard. So that's really set at a distributor and dealership level to provide incentives and penalties for importers to bring the right mix of vehicles. So fundamentally, the average emission profile of the vehicles that are being imported by a distributor must meet a certain standard. If you're importing too many dirty cars, you end up paying a fee. So the idea there is to create a broader pool of zero and low emission vehicles for people to choose from. The next element is something that is new. It's only just rolled out as from the 1st of April. So you may not have seen this yet, but to coincide with that, introducing a new label system. So all car dealerships now are required to display the correct label for each car. 3 colored labels are being used. The green label, for example, can be used for any vehicle with CO2 emissions below 147 grams per kilometre. That covers pretty much all of the PHEVs and BEV vehicles. It shows the economy rating and also the approximate running costs, similar to what you see today. But it also includes the emissions. And if it's a green sticker on the car, then you are to get a rebate on your purchase. If it's a blue one, then there's no fee to pay. And if it's a red one, then there's a fee to pay. Fairly simple, good visual indicator. Also, the quantity of information now that's being required to be displayed by dealers is significantly greater than what it was. The other thing I just wanted to mention is the total cost of ownership calculator. So while the purchase price is one thing to consider when you buy a vehicle, and we know, and those that are looking at electric vehicles, the upfront cost is considerably higher than the equivalent petrol vehicle. We've refreshed the total cost of ownership tool out under the GenLess brand, really to help you consider the total cost of ownership. So what the calculator does, it adds up all of the costs related to buying an operating vehicle and then pretty much subtracts the price the vehicle is expected to be sold for in the future. So it gives you a clear idea of the total cost of owning a vehicle over a period of time. Excuse me. It's worth noting that the tool was originally set up as a business tool, so all of the prices are GST exclusive. So you just need to be aware of that when you're using the tool. But all of the parameters, such as the fuel price, you can manually enter and change that. The length of time you want to own the car, you can change that. The amount, the electricity price you're paying, you can change all that to customize it for your own needs. So all of those default variables are adjustable. And so using the tool, give an example here, comparing 4 commonly available EVs with very similar petrol model. What we've found is the cost of owning an EV can be significantly less than owning a petrol car. The TCO tool reflects that the average cost of ownership for the 4 EVs that we've got here right now, based on 5 years of ownership, is 67.5% of the cost of owning a petrol alternative. So the cost of owning an EV on average for 5 years, a new one, is $36,000. So that's the purchase price plus the running costs less the residual. $36,000 for an EV and $54,000 for a petrol car. What the tool does do is recognize that the for EVs do have a higher residual value after 5 years of ownership, where a petrol vehicle generally loses more value over that time. It's also predicted as EVs become more mainstream and petrol vehicles become less desirable, that differential will only grow. What we did find, and certainly what the forecasting is at the moment, is the examples of the cars here. The EV, sorry, I'm trying to remember the numbers. The EV can be expected to sell for about 50% of its purchase price, and the petrol vehicle about 43%. So that's one of the main entries in that. But look, I welcome you to go to the GenLess website. Unfortunately, it's not the easiest thing to find first up, but if you just do a search on the website of total cost of ownership, it'll get you access to the tool. Very easy to use, but I do just remind you that it is a GST exclusive pricing. That has caught a few people out. But look, good luck playing around with that. Some very, very interesting data is thrown up and very, very useful when you're considering moving to an electric vehicle. Thanks, Bailey.
Thanks, Richard. And I do recommend visiting that tool as well. I've shared it in the chat. And just in general, the GenLess website is really a fantastic tool. If you still have questions after this webinar, I'd really encourage you to visit the GenLess website. Awesome. So we're running a little bit behind schedule. So apologies if I rush through this a little bit. So I am going to cover charging in an electric vehicle. Perhaps the biggest adjustment when moving from a regular car to one that runs on electricity is how do we keep running? So rather than filling up with fuel, you'll be charging your car. And it's best to think, where do I park most regularly? And to look at using those charge points or using charge points installed in those locations. For most people, that means charging at home, then work, and then at other destinations. And for most people, charging at home is the most simplest. Charging overnight is the simplest, cheapest, and most convenient way to charge. And as Catherine mentioned earlier, you may be able to take advantage of off-peak electricity rates. We're also starting to see more and more businesses install workplace charging for their employees and their fleet vehicles and their visitors. And then sometimes you may want to top up when you've forgotten to charge or are heading out on a road trip. And that would be that en route charging and destination charging. An ever increasing number of destination charging stations are popping up at New Zealand highways and places like shopping malls, airports, supermarkets, and even petrol stations. I saw one of the questions earlier came through about future installations. I would also encourage you to look at the GenLess website and look for the projects that were approved in the round 2 of the new low emissions vehicle fund. There's lots of new locations earmarked for charging stations. And then we also have en route charging, which tends to be high-powered locations that you can get back on the road as quickly as possible. And so in summary, where you charge will depend on your behavior. Our charges are en route and destination charges. And interestingly, we have customers that only use the network when they're traveling outside the city. And then on the flip side, we also have customers who don't have access to any charging at home and will exclusively use public charging stations. So on to the next slide with charging habits. So interestingly, while public and fast charging stations, or public and fast charging is always the first question people often ask, people often consider when making the switch. A recent Insights into EV Charging Habits study, which was conducted by ECA with more than 900 EV drivers, indicates that around 82% of people most commonly charge at home, which makes sense. It's the easiest, convenient, most cheapest way to charge a vehicle. So charging at home is as simple as charging your phone. You just plug it in. As mentioned, most drivers will charge at home, which is great because it's economical to use off-peak electricity rates, and you're most likely to be using electricity generated by sustainable sources such as hydro, geothermal, wind, solar, if you're charging at night. And so when charging at home, some people will use a dedicated, just changing slides, a dedicated home charger like the one in the right, which is an Evnex charger. They're New Zealand manufactured and installed. And using a home charger like this, you can actually schedule for when electricity is the least expensive. But many will use just a standard 3-pin plug, especially for EVs with a smaller battery. I believe all of our speakers tonight actually use the 3-pin plug option and haven't needed to install a home charger, dedicated wall charger. So in that same study that I mentioned before, more than 70% of people use the standard 3-pin plug. The next, or the age-old question, how long will it take to charge? So this is another common question, and the time it takes to charge an EV will be as little as 30 minutes or more than 12 hours. It just depends on the size of your battery and the speed of the charging point. So this diagram will show that if you're using a 3-pin wall plug, it may take up to 15 minutes to give you 3 kilometers of charge, but equally if you use one of our high-powered 300 kilowatt chargers, you might be able to get up to 400 kilometers in just 15 minutes. The caveat there is it depends on the size of your battery. So you can find more information about that on our website. The next slide I want to show you is from PlugShare. So this is a map that shows all of the AC and DC charging points in New Zealand. Yeah, in New Zealand. It's a crowdsourced app that identifies both public and private charging stations, and you can filter between public, private, restricted, free, paid, CCS, CHAdeMO, AC and DC. So it's a really great tool. I would encourage you to take a look. And as you can see, there are more than 500 public charging stations across New Zealand. The orange icons are rapid DC charging sites, and those are ideal if you haven't got long, you just want to stop and get a quick charge, whereas the green icons depict AC or destination charge points. Destination charges are slower charging points, which use the vehicle's onboard charger. Got tongue-tied. They're ideal if your car will be parked for a longer length of time, such as a parking building, shopping centre, or workplace. I'm going to show you zoomed in on Auckland. Those are the public DC and AC charging stations around the country. And just a little bit of a visual, this is what an AC charging station might look like. You'll see this one here in the middle with the black leaf. That's the Wellington Street Side project, and some are kind of might be located next to a DC charger. Some are located in parking garages like the Wilson car parks in Auckland CBD. And this is what a DC charging site might look like. So those are our 300 kilowatt chargers. There's also a couple of 50 kilowatt chargers there, Tesla charger. So a wide range of equipment. And I'd like to finish up by showing you our how to charge video, which is for our 50 kilowatt charger. So this video will give you an idea of the charging process, because while at first glance a rapid charger might seem quite high tech, you can rest assured that they're quite straightforward. And once you've used a fast charging station once, you'll see that they're fairly easy to use. So I'm going to go ahead and play that now. This takes about, the video is about 1.5 minutes. You'll see my face in here. So there we go. I'm going to turn this off so you're not seeing me twice. We'll open the floor for questions now, and I'll welcome our other speakers back on with me. So we've come to the Q&A session. We've already had a few questions come through during the webinar, but now's your opportunity to ask any questions that you might have, and I will direct those to the right panelist. Welcome back, everybody.
Good.
Cheers, man. Great job.
Okay, let's start with choose which ones. Okay. Sorry. So does anyone want to take this question? Catherine, could you be the person to answer this?
Yes, sure. I can answer that one. The batteries don't actually die, Sue, I suppose is the first point to mention. The batteries of a car may become the standard of the amount of range that there is in the battery may have come to a level that you no longer feel is sensible. But there will still be charge in that battery, and if somebody else doesn't want that car, there is also a second life as used as static storage, so that you could literally use the battery in place of a power wall, for instance, and actually keep the battery operational as storage. But actually, the contents of the battery are all far too valuable to ever be thrown away. And I'm sure you've never seen any EV batteries thrown casually on a heap, because that just doesn't happen. There are many companies who are extracting all the various minerals and recycling them, so the batteries do not die.
Awesome. Thank you, Catherine. I will go ahead and answer this question. What is an RFID fob? To use the ChargeNet network and also other networks in New Zealand, such as OpenLoop, you'll need to create an account, link credit card to that account, like setting up an Uber account, and then you can order an RFID fob that looks like, I normally have one on my desk. Does anybody have one close to them? It kind of like a little gym tag membership. And so when you use a charging station, you can activate your session either through your app, through our website, or by quickly swiping your RFID fob on the charging station. Perfect. When accelerating, is it more economical to floor it or increase speed slowly? Does anybody want to take that one?
It's definitely more economical to increase your speed slowly. Basically, how in a leaf anyway, what it shows above the speedo, the dot meter. The more dots you're using, the faster you're drawing energy out of the battery, and the least efficient it is. So if you gradually increase your speed, you're drawing energy out of the battery more slowly, and that's more efficient for the battery than big changes in energy draw.
Not as fun though.
Definitely.
Thank you. Can I plug my car into my house for backup power when the grid is down? Say in a Nissan Fire a 16 amp plug. I don't believe that exists at the moment, but I'll.
Yeah, it certainly is there in theory, and what we're talking here is what is V2H, or vehicle to home technology. The Nissan Leaf has the capability to do it. You need obviously the right equipment in the house to be able to invert the power from the DC in the battery into the home network. So it's not just a simple matter of sticking it in the wall. So it does require a little bit of equipment. Technically, it can be done. I think one of the issues at the moment, particularly with the current battery technology, is batteries do degrade over time. And by utilizing it frequently in a vehicle to home application, obviously you potentially accelerate that degradation. But as the new battery chemistries become more mainstream, that issue will go away. And I think you'll see more and more of that. So ECA has worked in partnership with Vector in Auckland and successfully done some trials of the technology. And I think it's just a matter of time, and when there is probably public demand, that it will be made available.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Richard. I suppose that question, that answers this question here as well. Another one that follows on from that. How much do new batteries cost? Again,
I can answer this one.
Pardon me?
I can answer this one probably with some experience I've had. So usually, I mean, there's basically 3 different ways that you can replace the battery. You can replace it with a brand new battery from the manufacturer. You can replace the battery with a refurbished battery, a battery that's come out of another car, but it's still a genuine battery. or you can replace the battery with a third-party battery, i.e. a battery made by someone that didn't make your vehicle. So in the first part, New Zealand, it's not very common to have first-party battery replacements. For example, one of the only car manufacturer that actually needs battery replacements at the moment is Nissan, but because most Nissan Leafs aren't sold new in New Zealand, Nissan New Zealand isn't really in the business of bringing over batteries to supplement parallel imported Leafs. So that's why with Nissan Leafs, a lot of people turn to refurbished batteries, which is taking a battery out of a wrecked Leaf and putting it into into your Leaf. And a place like EV Enhanced or GVI, a lot of EV dealerships around the country can help you out with that. And just to give you a real rough price point, because I know that's the bit that everyone always likes to have, you can get a Gen 1 replacement battery for as little as $5,000, and that will take you to another 30% of your battery degradation, basically. So it gives you about another 4 to 5 years of usage before you need to think about replacing that battery. And remember, every 2 years or so, you're saving about $2,000. So it's definitely good value for money if you do go down that path. But to go back to the last point, that third-party battery replacements, a place called EV Enhanced in Christchurch is actually building a replacement third-party liquid-cooled battery pack for the Nissan Leafs, and they're estimating the price is probably going to be somewhere about $25,000 for a brand new 40-kilowatt battery pack. And because that's liquid-cooled, it's going to last a lot longer than what we have seen for the Leaf batteries. So that's some very broad information.
And also, I guess...
Just to add to that information, we've done a little bit of work in this area as well. And I think it's fair to say the market maturity is not there yet because there is not yet a huge demand for batteries. And I think when the demand does come online, those solutions, like you see, will become more and more common. And the market will very, very quickly emerge to fill the demand.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's not a common occurrence to need to replace a battery at this stage. It's one of those misconceptions that is out there that you need to frequently replace the batteries, and it's just not the case. Let me find another. I'll publish this one. I can answer this quickly. I've noticed a few ChargeNet chargers on the map which are faulted. What causes the faults and how long do they normally take to be fixed? There are faults that happen. It is new technology. Also, good to remind that not all of the chargers on the ChargeNet network are owned by ChargeNet. Some of them are owned by different lines companies. So what causes the faults will differ. It might be age or degradation, or somebody has accidentally, not hung up the cable right, or has left the cable on the floor and it's been run over. But a nice little plug for ChargeNet is that our network uptime is 98%. So and generally they're fixed incredibly quickly. I would say at a guess 40 within 48 hours, and especially the ones that are located in critical places on the network, those ones are expedited and fixed as quickly as possible. Let me find another question. Charging station etiquette. Do you want to quickly cover this one, Catherine? And I'll also, in the resources email that I'll send out tomorrow, I'll include the charger etiquette guide.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, we have, basically the charging station etiquette.
Oh. We've lost her again.
Is be kind to everyone, be appreciative of the fact that if you are in a queue. I'm sorry, I'm thinking
No, you cut out there. I think we missed the bulk of what you were saying.
All right. I'll start again. I would say that the basic charging etiquette is to be kind and to be appreciative of the fact that if you're in a queue, you're in a queue. But really, queues at charging stations are very infrequent. But Bailey will send out a link to, we have a charging etiquette card that I happily send out to people, which explains the various charging etiquettes, and also has a place where you can leave your cell phone number, because the one thing that enrages most people is if somebody has left their car charging, has moved away from the car, the car has now finished charging, but the owner has not come back to it, and that perhaps causes the most friction. So kindness and being aware of when your car has finished charging are probably the top two.
Agreed. Maybe this is a question for you, Gavin, but it also might be a question for Google. I don't know when these vehicles are arriving.
I haven't heard anything, unfortunately. I'm no better than anyone else on the street, just Googling every now and then. I watch the press releases, but I have no news. I'm hoping maybe later this year, maybe. I'm excited about those two brands. Yeah, that's exciting, but I don't know. I wish I did. I'm sorry. I'm not an oracle.
I'm going to have to go away and Google both of those. There's just too many new models coming on the market that it's really hard to keep up. This is another one for you, Gavin. It appears all the current available EVs are all quite big. Are there any smaller EVs coming to New Zealand? I would also add in there that the e-Golf is a nice small option. The electric Mini is also a great option. I had a lot of fun in that one. Do you know of any other smaller EVs coming?
Yeah, well, the Renault Zoe is a great compact car right now. A lot of electric cars, like you mentioned the Mini, but the Mini could stand to miss a meal or two. It's got quite big, but I would say go for the Renault Zoe. As for other electric cars that are small coming around soon, maybe the Aura Cat, maybe. But all we've got right now are things like the Renault Zoe. That's the smallest I can think of off the top of my head.
There's the iMev as well.
Oh, of course, yeah, that's true.
And also the Peugeot E208 is not huge.
That's a good option. Okay. Should I keep my 11-year-old Leaf hoping for a replacement battery or get into a 60K debt for a decent range EV? Who wants to take this one?
I can have a go. I mean, I would really say with that question, it really depends on if your car currently does what you need. I mean, I wouldn't imagine it does if it's 11 years old and you're thinking about upgrading to something better. So your options are basically upgrade to a better vehicle. It doesn't have to be that 70K car, the 60K car, or you could put a better battery in there and stick with your existing Leaf, but spend a bit of money on putting the next size up battery into your current car. But usually it's the start of reaching out to someone that does battery replacements like Blue Cars or EV Enhanced, and finding out some pricing for getting that replacement battery and comparing that with what you could get for that pricing on new.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
And by new, I'm
Gavin, this one's for you. Any home plans for Ecotricity for EV owners that you know of?
No, I'm out of the accounts, but I can find out and get back to you. I just drive the cars, so I'm not too well versed on the accounting stuff, but I can find out. I'm looking at my phone, so I'm going to look really close. Nylan Hewa. Okay, I'll try and figure out some if there's any home plans for electric cars, and let you know somehow, mate.
Somebody had also asked what EV you drive. You're doing all of these reviews. What EV do you have at home?
Well, I'm driving electric cars all the time, so I do have a little car that I bought when I came back from the USA to New Zealand, but it doesn't get used. It just sits in the driveway. It's a little, don't hate me for this, and it won't be mine forever. It's a little Daihatsu Mira 3-cylinder with it's carbon offset, obviously, but I rarely ever use it. I filled it up yesterday, and that was the first time I filled it up since January 18. So yeah, because I'm just driving electric cars for work all the time, or using public transport, or I walk a lot as well.
And
so,
then,
sorry, don't hate me.
Follow-on question from that: if you could choose, if you won Lotto tomorrow and you could choose any of the electric vehicles that you've test driven, what would you go for?
Ooh. Oh man, that's such a question. If I could choose any car right now, it would be a choice between two. It would either be the Hyundai Ioniq 5, because I just love how I feel driving it. It's not the fastest, sleekest car in the world, but I love how I feel driving it. And it's got a nice light interior, whereas so many cars today will have black and grey. And I like a light interior. It's kind of like, like bring back that British Leyland brown velour. It's kind of like sitting on Grandpa's lap as he slides a Werther's original into your mouth, which sounds very creepy. But other than that, I would take the Tesla Model 3 because I got to drive one a couple of weeks ago. I'm in the process of making a video review about that now. And it is just, wow, the X factor. It's incredible. It's like, imagine the all-American, I mean, okay, where do I start? America has been the laughing stock of the automotive community for about 40 years. They make ghastly machines, terrible, terrible cars. And yet all of a sudden, this little California startup out of nowhere has started making arguably the best cars in the world. I'm like, America is back in the game all of a sudden. So it would have to be a choice between the Ioniq 5, because I love how I feel driving it, or the Tesla Model 3, because it is a space shuttle on wheels. It's brilliant. So hard choice.
Thank you very much for that.
Sorry for the visuals about the Werther's original.
Wouldn't expect anything less from you. Next question is from Samantha. If we're looking at rolling out EVs to our company, do we have to supply means to charge at their home addresses? Does anybody have an answer to this off the top of their head?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I can
put on my Zilch hat, because I used to work with Zilch, renting out electric vehicles. And what we did with those vehicles is we would just provide a home charger in the boot, and most people have a place they can plug in, whether it's in a garage or whether it's something a bit weird like dangling out the window. But all you need to do is provide that home charger, and in 8 hours that will usually add at least 100 Ks to that car. So that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And I think that there's certainly some case studies out there for other businesses that have done it. And I know that Lease Plan, Fleet Plan, I always get them all confused. They're all worth visiting their websites and speaking to them about what their other customers are doing in a similar position as well. Should we do maybe like there's quite a few more questions to go. If I choose maybe 4 or 5 more, and then we can wrap it up and we can follow up any leftover questions in a second in another email. Let me go. Sorry, it's hard to choose. There we go. One for you, Catherine. You don't live too rurally, but you do have solar arrays, so maybe you can take that one.
Indeed. Yes, we have a solar array and also a Tesla Powerwall at home here. So although we've all been telling you that charging at night with off-peak electricity is very, very good, what we tend to do if we're at home during the day and the sun's shining and we have power in our Tesla Powerwall, or we can see that we're about to spill electricity back to the grid, then we turn one of our cars on. We have 2 EVs at home, so we use our car batteries as a means of storing electricity rather than selling it back to the grid at a very reduced rate and having to buy it back later at a more expensive rate. So yes, we certainly utilize our solar arrays, and I can tell you that we have probably charged 50% of our charging capacity last year actually came from the sun.
That's awesome. Thanks very much for sharing that, Catherine. Maybe one for you, Richard. It's a popular question. Are IUCs coming for electric vehicles?
So I think the short answer is yes, of course it will. I mean, the road user charges are exactly what it says. It is a cost to service and maintain the roads. And I'm sure no one wants to be driving around in big potholes, congested roads that don't meet their needs. So they have to be paid for somehow. The Ministry of Transport has put out, or it might have been Wakakatahia, sorry, I'm not sure, but there is a consultation document out on a proposed complete ground-up redesign of the whole road user charge scheme for both cars and heavy trucks. One of the issues that the current scheme has come across, of course, is how do vehicles like plug-in hybrids get accounted for in road user charges. Being obviously partially derived from petrol, they're paying road user charges, but when they're being used from battery, they don't. And it's very, very hard to determine that. So one of the things that are being looked at is distance charging for all vehicles and automating that to some extent. But I think it's fair to say that there'll be an element of emission profiling as part of that. So I think, and this is a personal opinion, but I think what will logically emerge is a scale of road user charges based upon the emission profile of the vehicle as another incentive to encourage people to move to low emission vehicles. But look, it's coming. Inevitably, it'll come. I should know because I'm part of the oversight committee, but I think the current RUC exemption's out till 2025, end of 24, something like that.
24, yeah.
So there's a few years yet before a future is determined for that. But certainly the intent of the RUC exemption was another incentive for electric vehicles. If the volume uptake is not where it's needed to be, then either it'll be further extended or an alternative incentive we put in place to encourage the uptake. So that was a very long-winded way of saying yes.
No, that's awesome. Thank you very much. And this is probably a two-part question answer. I can answer it from a ChargeNet point of view, and then I'll hand it over to you, Richard, from an ECA point of view. What expansion plans do ChargeNet have, given the inevitable huge uptake of EVs in New Zealand, and how will we keep ahead of the curve? I guess traditionally, ChargeNet has led the charge by installing public fast chargers. We're seeing more and more companies install AC charging stations that is complementary to the DC network. We have a big, I'm looking at over here at our website, but we have our plans for future installations are available on our website. And I guess to move with the, so we're ahead of the curve, we will be installing more charging stations at one location. So similar to the Kaiwaka, the Gull, Kaiwaka, Bombay and Taupo locations, you'll see more charging stations available. And then Richard, I might hand over to you to talk about some of the other projects in the pipeline for other charging stations.
Yes, so ECA owns the government strategy for public charging, and our vision is quite simply that anyone driving an electric vehicle can charge when and where they want. And that therefore suggests that it's both location and charger density. So it's not simply a matter of just putting more chargers, filling in gaps, because sooner or later, and queuing is a bit of a problem now at some hotspots. So we're keeping an eye on it. What we're looking at with charging infrastructure is three distinct opportunities that typically people will charge at. So it's where I'm going to be for more than 6 hours. So typically that's at home, but it could also be in the workplace. We've parked that because it's largely taking care of itself. There are some emerging issues around potential peak demand loading, but we're looking at solutions for that, but it's not broken, it doesn't need fixing. The next opportunity is where I'm going to be for between 30 minutes and 2 hours. We're calling that destination charging, as Bailey touched on before. We don't need big power. The supermarkets, the libraries, those types of where you're going to be for that length of time. Again, we're not hugely worried about that because I think it'll be commercially viable very, very soon for businesses to use their own supply chains as they do, like Pack and Save. Well, if you spend a certain amount of money, you get a discount for your petrol. The same thing is occurring now for those destination type chargers. Where we do have an issue is the third phase, which is what we call journey charging or on the go charging. And fundamentally, that is where I need as much power as I can get in a shorter time frame as possible. And anything more than about 5 minutes, I'm going to get grumpy and I just want to get on with my job. So the issues there is it needs a lot of chargers. It needs a lot of big chargers. Big chargers are expensive. But the other issue from a management viewpoint is you will be surprised to know that where the chargers are for convenience is nowhere near grid exit points and substations. And putting chargers where the substations are is hugely inconvenient for people getting around the country. So we're trying now, working with Transpower, as to how we can make significant amounts of power available And what you'll see emerge over the next 2 to 3 years is probably trying to put it simply, charging clusters where there are 4, 5, 6 chargers co-located, pretty much like a petrol station forecourt experience you've got today. And I think over the next few years, that type of structure will emerge for the journey charging. And I think it's fair to say that the surveys we've done locally and the surveys that have been done overseas are quite consistent. As an electric vehicle owner, typically 80 to 85% of your charging needs will be met by either home charging or charging at work. 5 to 10 destination and 5 to 10 journey charging. So whilst we need to put all of those chargers in all of those locations, the issues are that it's unlikely to be commercially viable for quite a significant period of time. And in some locations may never be commercially viable, but we need to have chargers there to enable the network to be complete and allow New Zealanders to move around the country. Just one final challenge that we do have, and I will touch on it. Not a week goes by without somebody sending me a note saying, what the hell are you doing about Springs Junction? It seems to be a magnet for people to have a go at us. And look, I'll be actually quite blunt and honest with my assessment, give you an idea of the challenges we're facing. Yes, we would love to have a charger in Springs Junction. The current network capacity at the location is that we can get, I think, 20 kilowatt hours for about 4 hours. That's all that is available for us to put a charger in. So we could get away with a small charger with a battery backup, and we'd install that next week. The other problem that we want to avoid is all of a sudden, all of you new enthusiastic drivers with your Nissan Leaf that's only got 100k range will now say, I can now traverse the Lewis Pass because there's a charger at Springs Junction. And the next thing you know, there's about 400 people all queuing trying to use the same charger. So we've got to be quite careful around our planning, discourage people from using that route until we've got an adequate solution to cover it off. And look, we've looked at hydrogen-powered chargers, but I think the most stable one that we're going to come up with is a containerized battery solution. So the charger, so the power will trickle charge a container full of batteries, and then throughout the next day, it will obviously discharge as vehicles use that, and then we will look to grow that as the network grows. And then the final challenge is, and depending on which island you live in, you can either use Kaiteriteri Beach or Coromandel. For 11.5 months of the year, there is no one there. And then for about 3 weeks, half of New Zealand descends on these two locations. And so how do you provide infrastructure to support those particular sites? And that is a challenge, and that's certainly one we're looking at the moment. But we've got enough people in my team now looking at this problem, and we're quite confident that we can probably cover off 95% of the needs and deploy charging and charging infrastructure as the volume increases. The plan is to stay one step ahead of demand. So we don't overinvest, and we also don't invest in infrastructure in the wrong places. So it is something we're looking very closely at.
And I think that's a really, that will give a lot of people a lot of confidence to know that, with ChargeNet, with our charging data, we constantly manage, we constantly monitor those busy sites, but that equally EECA is really looking closely at what can be done to stay ahead of the curve. And I think that will give a lot of drivers a lot of confidence. I realize it's now 8:34, so I think that we'll probably need to cap it there, but I wanted to say a massive thanks to you, our panel of speakers, for taking your time and being with us tonight. We really appreciate it. I'm sure that, and I'm getting lots of messages down there. Everybody else appreciates it as well. I also wanted to thank the people who were responding to comments in the chat box as well. That definitely helped us out. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question. You're welcome to email it to me and I will try and get a response for you. But yeah, just a big thank you to everyone for joining us tonight.
Lovely to have been here.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye for now.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye.